So hello, everybody, and welcome. This is our webinar to kick off the year 2024, and we want to kick off the year with gentleness. So maybe the phrase kicking off the year is perhaps not even the phrase we want to use to get started, because what we want is gentleness. And quite often when we're grieving, gentleness is not something that comes readily to mind, nor is it necessarily our experience, because people don't know how to be there for us. It's not that they're unkind or that they want to be unkind or that they want to be not gentle. They don't know what gentleness for those who are grieving is. And that's really unfortunate that we, as the grievers, need to teach them. But we start by teaching ourselves. So today's session is really all about what is gentleness? What does it look like? How can we gift ourselves gentleness and set that intention for the year? Because I'm a firm believer in what you set into intention does unfold in ways you can't even imagine. So we can just use this time together to set a really clear intention that 2024 is going to be a gentle year. The reason the word gentle came to me is because I was experiencing not gentle myself, right? I've literally just moved. My birthday is the middle of December, and I arrived in my new home the day before my birthday. And then it was all hands on deck to get me to my new home. It's been all hands on deck to unpack my new home. It's not been a gentle go. And so I'm just longing for gentleness. My word for the year is love. And I want to speak for a moment before I start the PowerPoint on what a word of the year means, because it's how I set intention. I believe in meditation and I believe in messages coming to me as opposed to my egoic mind. Does everybody know what I mean by egoic mind, right? The part of me that is my brain trying to problem solve. I'm not giving my brain a problem to solve by saying, okay, so what's my word for the year? And then allowing my brain to figure it out. When I'm meditating, I'm looking for what is the word that's coming to me. For 2023, my word was home. And that meant home in my beingness, home in my environment, and who knew it meant my actually purchasing a new home. A word, the word is your word for the year if it stretches you. If you're a little nervous about the word, and let me tell you, the word love, I'm a little nervous about it. It's a lovely, warm, fuzzy word, but it's also what is that going to call forward in me, right? When it's a big word like love, that touches anything and everything. That's love of self, that's love of others, that's love of service. That's a big word. So it's got me a little nervous, and that's what tells me it is the right word. But you don't want to be so anxious about it that it would block you. And that's when I realized I needed a second word, and the second word that came in was gentleness. Okay. So I just want to be transparent about where and how that word came into being for me. And then what I want to do is I want to share the PowerPoint. So I just need to find where my PowerPoint is. Oh my goodness, I have a few too many things opened up here. So it would seem. Where is the PowerPoint? There it is. Okay. So we're going to share screen now. You're seeing how technologically advanced I am, or not, as the case may be. And we're going to go to slideshow. There we go, from the beginning. And you tell me, like, just give me a thumbs up if you can see what is in front of you. Yeah, you can see it. Stepping into 2024 gently. Now, the reason I chose that particular picture for this one is because often that's what grief looks like. There's some kind of light that we get to see every now and then, but that kind of dark cloud is what we experience more often than not. And we're sitting on a bench, notably alone. Can anybody identify with that particular picture? Yeah, I'm seeing the nods. Okay. So how can you not go gently when this is part of the experience? Right? Even when the world around you is either isolating you or you're feeling isolated because the world around you is just moving too fast and it's not working for you. Um, There needs to be gentleness and understanding and compassion here. So, what I wanted to do is start with this quote on gentleness. Nothing is so strong as gentleness, nothing so gentle as real strength. And that's St. Francis de Sales. Um, the reason this quote touches me so deeply is I spend almost every day of my working life saying to somebody, no tears is not a sign of strength. If anything, the choice not to cry is a sign that you're not ready to show your strength. Tears are actually strength. But because we have this myth and this belief that tears are a sign of weakness, we really push against our tears, and our tears are the healing part of the grief journey because tears are mourning. So I'm just going to quickly cover basics of healthy mourning, which is the definition of grief is your internal experience to any kind of loss. The definition of mourning is the external expression of that internal experience. So when we cry, that's the external expression of what's going on the inside. And the only way that we move through the grief journey is to convert our grief to mourning, is to convert what's going on the inside into external expression. And you may have noticed that, when you cry, particularly when you do ugly cry, anybody know ugly cry? When you do ugly cry, do you know that sense of release and relief that you feel? Like suddenly you can breathe again. This elephant that's been on your chest has been released somehow. That's why we have to mourn, because when we convert our grief to mourning, we have that release and that relief, right? So this quote is so special to me because it honors that there is nothing so strong as gentleness. Gentleness is not weak, it's not self-indulgent. It actually is the root of the strength that we need in order to get through the grief journey. And nothing is so gentle as real strength, because real strength is we allow ourselves to cry. Real strength is we allow ourselves to do what we need to do. Grief is inside of us, and when it bubbles to the surface, whether it's bubbling through tears or it's bubbling through a story or a memory, or it's bubbling through laughter, whatever it's bubbling through, when we allow the expression of it, if it's anxiety, if it's fear, when we give that voice, that is real strength. But it takes gentleness to call forward what is bubbling forward in our grief journey. Is that quote making sense to everybody? Excellent. So what we're going to be covering today is the gentleness and the strength. We're going to break that down into the two definitions and what do we really mean by both. What is in between time? Because when we are in a new year, it is an in between time. Everybody says goodbye to the old and they're pushing away the old and they're letting go of the old and they're wanting to step into the new, but there is an in between time between what we knew works for us and what we're stepping into. I told you that I've just moved into a brand new house. Let me tell you, the habits of the old house don't work in the new house. So I'm in an in-between time here, right? We all discover in between times, but there's no more in between time than the grief journey. So we're going to talk about in between time and specific how that connects to the grief journey. We're going to talk about being patient and being compassionate because gentleness really requires patience and compassion. And then finally, we're going to talk about gifting ourselves what we most need, particularly for 2024, so that we can walk through 2024 with gentleness. So, group agreements are confidentiality. What's said here stays here. And as I said, with chat box stuff, nobody gets their name attached to anything. If a question comes forward from that, I will simply speak the question and answer the question. But mostly we're going to do the Q&A after the recording, so we're not going to worry about that. We always speak from our own perspective, not we all or you all. It's always got to be I. No judgment or unsolicited advice given, particularly in the chat box. Stick with me in the conversation. Don't be giving somebody else advice. and we honor and we respect each other with everything that we say and do. Most of all, we're going to trust the process. And right now we're in the process of this particular webinar. So we're going to trust where the conversation goes, that everybody's going to get their needs met and everybody's going to get their questions answered. So we don't need to anxiety or be nervous about what if she doesn't get to me. I promise we're going to get to all questions before we go away from here. So what is gentleness? According to Webster's number 2, gentleness is amiable and kindly. So I love the word kindly. There's a movement afoot right now to bring kindness back to the earth because there's a recognition that we've moved away from just basics of kindness. And so I love that kindness is connected to the gentleness conversation. But I also appreciate that Webster says that gentleness is not harsh, it is not severe, and it is not violent. So if what we're experiencing is any kind of harshness or severity, um, then a good question to ask in that moment is, what would be gentle instead? If we just recognize that we're in a moment of, I'm being a little harsh with myself right now, what would bring gentleness to this moment? Because I'm all about the practical. Like, this is all theory, but how does boots hit the ground on this one? Boots hit the ground on this one if we use this not harsh, not severe, not violent as the flag. If I'm feeling that there's harshness, if I'm feeling somebody's just been severe with me or I'm being severe with myself, how can I bring gentleness to this moment? Period. That's the question. Right? Just what do I need to do? And if you ask yourself that question and you take a moment to take a breath in, because breath is the most gentle of all. So if I ask myself a question and then I allow myself a breath, because breath brings the all stop. So what would be gentle here? Oh, hey, another breath might be what's most gentle here, right? Because the breath actually did a pattern interrupt on that severeness. Gentleness means it's easily handled or managed. So if I'm up against something that doesn't feel easily managed, then what can I do to break it down so that it will be easily handled? And often this means, who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to get help from? With this house situation, what I noticed is I was gentle when I said, oh, that person said they could help me with, let me invite them into this. But most of us, and for those of us who are womb twins, I know there are people who registered for this who will see this after the fact. And I know there are people who are with us live who are womb twin survivors. Womb twins are notorious for I'll do it myself and independence. It's because we've always had to from the time we were in the womb alone, right? So gentleness for a womb twin is often, who can I get assistance from with this? That's gentle, kind, and loving act we can offer ourselves. We just need to make sure that whoever we're trusting is trustworthy. And they need to prove their trustworthiness to us. That's an important piece of the puzzle. Okay. And finally, it needs to be gradual, not sudden, which is sometimes an oxymoron for the grief journey, because in the grief journey, things show up, boom. You know, a song comes on the radio and boom, we're back to a moment and it's sudden and it's not gradual. So gentleness in that moment is, okay, how can I backpedal what's going on right now? How can I gently backpedal so that what just took me by surprise, and often it's referred to as a grief burst, okay? If we're having a grief burst, if we're having a burst of tears, we're having a burst of emotion, we're having whatever the burst is, and it took us by surprise and it's sudden, one of the ways we can bring gentleness to it is to recognize, okay, it's a grief burst, which means mourning is coming through. This is healing. Just even that thought, that even the suddenness of it, it's allowing mourning through, can be gentle and can help to make it gradual for yourself, because that will slow it down. It's like, oh, I appreciate what's happening right now. Sometimes in grief, the burst has to come through because without the burst, we would fight it. We would push it away. So we can be grateful for those grief bursts that happen, but we can also then step it back and allow it to be not quite so sudden. Does that resonate? Does that make sense? Yeah, I'm seeing nods. I'm noticing that the chat box while this thing is up, I can see your faces, but I can't see the chat box because it's showing me the screen. So if you have something in the chat box, just raise your hand so that I know to look into the chat box. I'd be happy to do that. So, what is strength? So we talked about gentleness. Now let's look at strength, because that lovely quote brought these two so closely together. According to Webster's again, strength is the power to resist force, stress, or wear. Now, when we're in a grief journey, do we feel like we have power to resist force? Do we feel like we have power to resist stress? No, we just feel completely stressed out. Yeah, I see those. Right? That's a hell to the no for most of us, you know? So it's important that we find a symbol of strength. And in the HMR program, our very first week of the year is always to talk about what is our symbol of strength. And so for those of you who are in the HMR program, we did this yesterday. For those of you who want to join the HMR program, we'll talk about that in a bit. And the recording is just sitting there waiting for you. But we spent a lovely hour where I read from my book. And if you're not familiar, this is my handy dandy book, right? I wrote a book. And I wrote 52 ways to convert grief to mourning. But way number one is literally symbol of strength. And so in the HMR program, that's what we looked at this week. And we just literally read through the chapter, which is 2 pages. The reason your symbol of strength is so important, and I'm going to invite each of you to consider what is your symbol of strength, is because when we have that in our hands, when we have that on our walls, when we have that symbol of strength, whatever it may be for you, in our sight lines, then we begin to feel like we really do have power to resist the stress. We have power to resist the force, but we need to be reminded of it in these moments when we feel like we don't. Right? So gentleness dictates that we have that symbol really in our sight lines at all times. The picture that you see in front of you, that would be one of my symbols of strength, the buffalo. It's because I had the great privilege of working with an elder from the Siksika Nation of the Blackfoot in Alberta. And the elder taught me that the wisest of all animals is the buffalo. And it is because it is only the buffalo that knows when the storm is coming. And on the prairies, you see the storm coming for a long period of time. Only the buffalo knows to turn and face the storm and start walking towards it. Every other animal, humans included, will turn and run. So when we see a grief burst on the horizon, we don't embrace it. We don't run to it. We turn and run from it. The problem is when you have a storm coming, the buffalo who turns and faces it knows the shortest amount of time in the storm is to walk through it. Every animal that turns to run away from it is now going to spend the most amount of time in the storm because the storm is moving with them, not opposite them. So that is buffalo wisdom. But the elder, and I was so grateful for this, he went on to say, and Creator rewarded the buffalo. Because the buffalo knew what they needed to do, Creator gifted the buffalo with a strong tuft of hair right where it needs it the most. So it doesn't feel the effects of the storm and it can keep its eyes down and see through the storm. A beautiful reminder that you can trust the process, that you have support coming to you from all sides, but that you need to have the courage and the strength to walk through it, to face it and to walk through it. This is how we convert grief to mourning with ease and grace, is we learn how to gently turn into it and lean on it so that we can move through it, so that we can convert the grief to mourning, right? Different definition of strength is the power to resist attack. And I find it interesting that in the dictionary, because the other is power to resist as well, it doesn't include attack in the first one. Attack is its separate one. So for me, when I'm thinking about grief and I saw that, I thought, the attack, that would be the attack of others who don't know how to support us in our grief journey. And we were talking a little bit about that before we turned the video on, that there are people who do not know how to support us in our unique grief journey. So it's important for us to understand we are the expert on our grief. I am not the expert on any of your grief. Your grief is your grief, and therefore you are the expert on it. I can help to coach you and to guide you. And it's why I call myself a grief coach, not a grief counselor. I can only coach you in what is going on for you. Right. And so the attack sometimes comes from people who have advice for you about how you should be going through what you're going through. Anybody experience that? Yeah, I see some hands there, right? So if they're telling you what you need to do, that's attack. That's them not acknowledging you are the expert on your grief. So part of strength is to remember that you have the power to resist somebody else's advice, as well-meaning as it may be. It's ill-informed. Concentration or potency, that actually refers to when you think about the strength of a drug, right? That it's got this strength. That's concentration or potency. But for us, concentration and potency means how strong am I feeling in this moment? Where is my strength level now? I'm going to be at different strength levels throughout my grief journey. So where am I right now? And how can I bolster that up? Often we need other people to support us in the bolstering or to remind us, but that's why a grief symbol is, or a strength symbol is so important for us, because it can remind us and it can up our potency in the moment that literally the moment I see this picture, I'm reconnected because it has meaning for me. So the question is, what has meaning for you? I've had clients for whom it was the Energizer Bunny. So they got an Energizer Bunny on their keychain and they would rub the bunny as a thing of strength, right? For others, it was the sun. It was a picture of the sun. They had pictures of the sun all over their house. So you have to find what's true for you, right? Strength is intensity. So we don't need to be afraid of the intensity. We just need to learn what strength feels like inside of us. And for many of us, we don't know what strength feels like until we're going through our grief journey. So we need to welcome that intensity, but sometimes at first it feels fearful because we're not familiar with it. And finally, about firmness and toughness, it is so unfortunate that in our grief journey, we need to be the ones to teach other people. But we do need to teach other people because certainly in North America, but literally around the world, we don't do grief well. We don't teach people how to do grief. We don't know what the grief journey is until we've been through it. So we do need to be firm and we do need to be tough and we do need to say, you're part of my wellness team or you're not, right? And if you're not part of my wellness team, then I need to be very clear about that. And I need to be very clear with my boundaries around you. And that takes strength. Okay. All of that making sense? Wellness team is also part of what we talk about in month number 1 of the HMR program. So that's coming up for those of you who are part of the program. In between time. So this is my absolute favorite quote. I say it almost every day. Death ends a life, but it does not end a relationship. It's Robert Woodruff Anderson, who's an American philosopher from the 1930s, who said this originally. But you may have heard it in Mitch Albom's book, Tuesdays with Maury, Death Ends a Life, Not a Relationship. It was basically Maury Schwartz, his teacher's take on this quote. You may also see it attributed to Jack Lemmon. It's because he played Maury Schwartz in the television movie, and he was asked in an interview, what was your favorite of all of the teachings of Maury? And he said, death ends a life, not a relationship. So often it's credited to him as well. I like to explain when it's credited to other people from the originator, and I always like to get to the originator. Why is this quote important? Because this gives us the map to the grief journey. For those who say, I will grieve for the rest of my life, no, I'll be in relationship for the rest of my life. I may have moments of wishing that you were here with me physically, but if I really recognize that death ended your life, but it did not end my relationship with you, then the grief journey is about bringing me from a time when I was with you physically to a time where I've now discovered where the relationship is with you now. And the grief journey is the journey in between these two times. And we do heal from grief. Grief is not a lifetime sentence, because when we find where the relationship is now, that's when we're free to live our best lives again with that relationship in its new form. As a womb twin, you may think, well, what does that look like? For womb twins, again, it ended the life of our twin or our multiple, and it ended in the womb when we didn't have words for it. So what's important is that we honor there was this time when we were with them, and that time lives in our body's memory. And now we have an ongoing relationship with them that we've had since before we were born. What we need to do is we need to find and honor where that relationship is now, because when we do, we will be able to move through the grief journey and live our best lives. With womb twins, it requires individuation because sometimes we get enmeshed with our twins. There are lots of other components to the grief journey. And it's important that we walk them, but please know, death ended the life of your beloved, but it did not end your relationship with them. And anybody who teaches you, you just have to say goodbye, they don't understand this fundamental truth. And most people will choose to stay in their grief journey as opposed to moving through the grief journey because they want to stay loyal to their loved one. They don't want to say goodbye. It's a misunderstanding of what the grief journey is about. Grief will never ask you to say goodbye. Grief will ask you to say, to let go of the physical relationship and say hello to where the relationship is now. So for me, the way I define the grief journey is a journey from love, the love that was expressed physically. Even for womb twins in the womb, we expressed love physically. It's a journey from love, to the loving relationship that we have now that we haven't yet found. And we do that journey with love because that's the way we do it with ease and grace. Okay. The in-between time, my teacher and mentor, Dr. Alan Wolfelt, refers to it as liminal space, betwixt and between a past that you long for and a future that you can't see yet. That's the in-between time. Okay. So the question is, how do we do this journey, and how do we do this journey gently? And because we're so overwhelmed by this journey, sometimes that's where it doesn't feel like it can be gentle or that we have the strength to do it. Oops. So being gentle with yourself, being patient and compassionate with yourself requires that you create a space for yourself to move at whatever your own pace is. Not at the pace of what your mother says you should be doing, what your spouse says you should be doing, what your child says you should be doing. It's what your best friend says you should be doing. It's not their journey. Grief takes as long as grief takes. Therefore, you have to move at your own pace. So what you need to do is you need to find a community that understands that pace. For some people, it's bereavement support groups that understand that slowdown and the necessity of the slowdown. For other people, it's like-minded people who, with similar spiritual beliefs. For some people, the spiritual community, because they sometimes say things like, if your faith was stronger, you wouldn't be grieving so much. That's misinformation, and that's part of that harshness and severity. And so now, are you really part of my wellness team? So finding your community that can really support you and understand you. And for womb twins, there is nothing more important than finding other womb twins. Because truly, when you find other womb twins, that's when, oh, okay, now I hear. Now I recognize, and I recognize me and you. Like what you're saying makes sense to me. I get it. Right? Because we have similar backgrounds. So it's really important to find your community, wherever that community may be. So this book that I mentioned to you before, this was a love letter to my mom. My mom died in 2017. My mother was the poster child for buried and carried grief. If you haven't heard the term buried and carried grief, anybody who tells you it just takes time to heal grief, not true. Grief is the one wound that will bury and carry inside of you. And as long as you don't engage with the grief just lives inside of you. My mother's brother died when they were in their 40s, and she couldn't talk about him to her dying day without her whole body shaking, without tears flooding, and that's buried and carried grief. That's because the minute his name was mentioned, the grief would so overwhelm her, and instead of walking through it, instead of allowing that mourning to heal, she'd clamp down on it and push it farther down. So this love letter to my mother, 52 Ways to Convert Your Grief to Mourning, was how I walked through her death. But it's a love letter to her because she showed me what buried and carried grief is and does. And I vowed to do it a different way. So the opportunities with HMR to find your community and find a program that maybe works for you. So if we start with the HMR program, this is 52 ways. Well, so here's the phenomenal thing about this. I just wrote whatever was coming to me to write. And the book itself is built so that there is a chapter where it's a page. Paragraph number 1 describes the conversion technique. Paragraph number 2 and sometimes 3 describes how I have used the technique. And then the second page, I don't know if you can see those heart points there. Those heart points are just getting started, ideas for how you might use that particular conversion technique. It was my printer who brought the books to me. And when she delivered the books to me and we opened it up, she said, 52 ways. Well, that's kind of handy. And I'm like, it is? And she said, yeah, 52 weeks in a year. And I went, oh my gosh. So it was November of 2019 that the book was published. And so in December, I thought 52. All right, so let me take 2020 and let me just go through it with people 1 week at a time for 52 weeks. A year later, I realized that I would have curated the book a little differently. I would have given themes to each of the 12 months. And so now we run the program this way. And people who have walked with us, Susie, Joe, and Diane, many others as well, I just love what they say here because it speaks to the power of the program. Thank you for all you do. I'm doing all I can to heal, but you and your program have been by far my most valuable healing tool. It's because you can buy the book and you can read the book, and I encourage you to do that and work with the book. And many people have and have sent me lovely notes to tell me how helpful that has been to them. But when you hear me reading the chapter and you hear me stopping in between sentences and talking about where that sentence came from and why that sentence is important in the grief journey, it's a bit of a different feel. Um, and then we talk about, well, how can we modify this to your specific grief journey? So Susie, now she's a very dear, sweet lady, and she's allowed me to share a bit of her story. So she lost her beloved partner, and it was a very difficult loss. There were many things that unfolded in the journey, um, and then she spent about a year and a half with us. Um, and then I got a letter from her about a year ago saying, so guess what? I've met my new partner, which was just completely unthinkable to her during the journey. And it is unthinkable to most of us. But that's the degree of the healing that occurs. And so I'm just ever so grateful to her. Joe in Ireland said, this program is as vital as doctor's appointments. I have always looked for my vitality to come back. Now I have hope. And that this program offers hope just thrills me no end. And then Diane in Washington said, this has been an amazing experience for me to work with Maria and the HMR organization. I have such peace of mind. To me, that combination of peace of mind and hope, if that's what the program offers, and it is from what people have said, then I am greatly gratified, and I love continuing to do this program year on year. For womb twins, we have the womb twin multiple chat. Mary, Carrie, and Sarah. I didn't realize I had Mary and Carrie there. um, gave beautiful testimonials. And so this is the thing about womb twins. We are a unique, we have unique personality realities. And it's because of what happened to us in the womb, and it's because of how we were born into the world. And it's because our grief experience happens from before we were born in, before we had words. So for Mary, the womb twin chat group has become the irreplaceable part of my healing journey. Weekly, we bear witness to each other's struggles, see our own reflected, and in part feeling grateful, connected, and encouraged. I love that because we start every chat with going around the room with where are we right now, whatever word is coming to us, just to presence ourselves to the room. And we end every session with a gratitude word, and invariably gratitude, connected, encouraged, supported. Those are the words that come up by the end of the hour and a half together. We meet weekly on Wednesdays in the US and in Europe, and I guess it's Thursdays in New Zealand and Australia. Um, and and it's just really rewarding week on week. I co-facilitate this group with Olga Waters, who is the Ireland representative to Womb Twin International. I'm the Canadian representative to Womb Twin Worldwide, is what we're called. And that's Althea Hayton's group that now is run by her son, Philip Hayton. And he shows up every now and then in the Womb Twin chats as well. So Carrie says this safe and open-hearted space has invited such deep connection with regard and respect for each individual healing journey. I am so grateful for it. And we are so grateful for everybody who participates in it. And finally, Sarah, um, I'm very grateful for the safe space and support I find in the group chats where I can share and connect with others, where I feel accepted with understanding and compassion. If as a womb twin you are not feeling accepted, you are not feeling like your story is being honored, um, then you need to stand up for your own story. You need to know that this is my story, this is my truth, right? And I know we spoke about that before the recording started, so that's why I'm mentioning that here. Um, to be with people who have had to stand up for their story, and every womb twin I've ever met has had to stand up for their story with somebody. It seems to be part of the healing journey, right? So this is an important part of the healing journey for sure. And then the other opportunity I wanted to share with you is the Flex Pass. So I do something quite unique, at least I think it's unique in the industry. I don't believe that we need an hour every day or week or whatever that looks like. Sorry, every week or every month. What I believe is that we need whatever time we need, and that our grief will tell us what we need. It's not our intellectual, I only need 20 minutes. It's what's my grief doing right now. So the Flex Pass is about a 3-hour time slot that we book. Every time you book, I reserve an hour and a half. But if we only use 20 minutes of that hour and a half, then we only use 20 minutes, and it's banked down, right? So it's to honor your grief journey and the wisdom of your grief. And your grief will let us know. We don't go beyond an hour and a half because then we tend to loop. There's no use to it. Most sessions tend to be about between 35 minutes and an hour. But I've had sessions that are as little as 15 minutes, and that's perfectly fine. So as Sharon in England said, I do feel my mother sent you to me. I really do. It's very special. Just loved working with her. I love working with everybody who comes to me. I see in the chat box, how do you know the difference from allowing or resisting grief? Oh, what a great question. Or mourning. I'm going to answer that question as soon as we're done here, for sure. That's such an important question. Thank you for asking it. The Flex Pass, I'm so grateful to you, Maria. I was guided to you, and I am grateful. You are an amazing healer, very sweet of Joan in San Francisco and Jane in Edmonton. So much gratitude for the support, the framework, and the wise counsel. I don't know where I would be without it. I think that's the bottom line, is that when you need the support, you need the support for maybe a short amount of time or maybe a large amount of time. who knows? But you find the support that you need. So let's answer this question here. The question is, how do you know the difference from allowing to resisting grief? So you know you're resisting grief. Well, let me say two things about this. There's such a thing as dosing grief. Dosing grief means that I'm taking a respite from grief. It's too much, it's too overwhelming, so I need to go sit in front of the TV, or I need to go listen to some music, or I need to do something that pulls me away from this. That's dosing, and that's right and natural, particularly in the early days of grief. But when dosing becomes an agitation, I'm watching TV and I know I should be doing something else. I'm eating a bag of potato chips and that feels very wrong. When there's an agitation to it, then I know I'm resisting. Now, for womb twins, the way I discovered I was a womb twin, or the way I clued into there was something going on, and then I asked deeper questions, was there are grief avoidant patterns of behavior. And Dr. Wofelt, when I was studying with him, gave us a whole list of grief avoidant patterns of behavior. And he said most people will prefer one or two ways to avoid their grief. And I was sitting there going, check, 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 check. And I just checked through all of them. I've since discovered that's a womb twin phenomenon, because what is grief avoidant for most people is life avoidant for most womb twins. We avoid life by doing these avoidant behaviors. And I'm saying that because I want to make sure that I'm including the womb twins in this conversation. So this is why this is such an important question, the difference between allowing or resisting grief. If we're aware something is coming up, and it can be any something, if we're willing to be present to that something, if we're truly willing to be present to that something and curious about what it's teaching us, then we're not resistant or avoiding it. That's the easiest answer I can give you, right? We tend not to avoid mourning because we avoid it earlier on. By the time we're mourning, it's already in process. So once it's already in process, once the tears are already there, I mean, we can stifle the tears, but it's much harder to do. Even if we've mourned just a little bit and then we start stifling again, what we're stifling is the grief. We're pushing the grief down, because the mourning is allowing the grief to move through us. So what we're resisting or fighting is grief, not mourning. Mourning is the release and the relief of it. Does that distinction make sense? I see the person who is asking is giving me a thumbs up. So great. Thank you for that question. That's a great question. Yeah. And if you want to talk more about that after, we certainly can do that. Yeah. So I want to let you know that I do have a winter special. We've got the coupon code Gentle 2024, which will give you $50 off of a couple of programs. I will let you know the programs. The HMR program, which is a weekly program, and we meet Wednesdays at 3 o'clock Pacific time. That program is normally $169 a month, but for the winter special, it is at $129 a month. And if you use the Gentle 2024, then you'd get $50 off of the first month, and then it would just automatically lock in at $129. But once you lock in at a certain price, that's the price you pay for the duration of you being in the program, right? Your cost doesn't change depending on what it is this month. Whatever you lock in at, that's what you lock in at for the duration of you being in the program. Womb Twin Multiple Chat is $85 per month. I believe that's about to go up because we haven't changed it we're going on our 4th year of doing it. So I'm guessing it's about to change. But right now it's still $85 per month. And the Gentle 2024 code will work on that, and it'll get you $50 off of your first month on that. And then our Flex Pass is normally $660, so that's for the 3 hours. But again, the $50 off on the first one. And then we do a continuation one, which is $600. So if you complete your 3 hours and then you want to do another 3 hours, then it's $600 instead of $660. So this $50 will cut most of that, $60 off. Basics of healthy mourning. If you just want to do like a 5-day study, and this is literally a 1-week program, and you're only given a week to do it so that you stay on track with it. This is a $49 program. It's a self-study program and it's called Basics of Healthy Mourning. So if you want to do that, you can just go on the Healthy Mourning website, which is healthymourning.com, and click on, I think that's the one for it. This is a little blurry and I apologize. But if you just go to healthymourning.com, this is the picture you'll get, and you can click right on to that self-study program. You can click right on to getting the book. That's this one. Um, there's some other possibilities for you in healthymourning.com. So I invite you to come visit me on my website. And if you're looking for immediate grief support, this is another page on the website. Booking a discovery call, you can have a free 30 minutes with me where we can figure out your next steps. You can do a self-assessment sheet. There are a number of things you can do. This self-study is, again, the link to the self-study program, and this is a link to the book. So those are kind of the things I wanted to let you know, because if your community is here with me, then join us and let's support each other and let's gently walk through 2024. Whatever you do, please make sure you find your symbol of strength. That's so important. Find your symbol of strength, so that you've got that rooting and that anchor no matter what 2024 delivers to you. Because the truth of 2024 in any year is we go into the year with this prayer for, may it be a peaceful year, may it be a joyful year, may it be a happy year, whatever it is, may it be a healthy year. But the human condition is that things happen in our world. And so we need to know how to tether to something that anchors us so that we're reminded to be gentle and we're reminded of our strength. So it is my genuine hope that this has been helpful to you. If you are watching this in a recording and you have questions, please shoot me an email at maria@healthymourning.com, or book a discovery call with me. Go on the website, healthymourning.com, and book a discovery call with me, and we will connect and chat. I'm going to stop the recording now so that I can have a chat with everybody who's here with me live. Thank you so much for being with me. Much love to you all. Namaste.